Om Shanti and hello everyone. I've been with Brahma Kumaris for over 45 years and I came into contact with them. I was only 23, I think, at the time. And I was one of the first Westerners in a small centre in London, and there were three sisters in the centre. One was Daddy Janki, who's just passed away recently, and the other two sisters, Jenti and Sudesh. So, very small group, very few Westerners, as I said. But the vibration was so powerful. The vibration was so clean. And I'd been searching a lot. I'd already visited about 30 countries searching. And what convinced me was not so much the words, because I confess that I didn't understand much in the beginning, what they were saying. But I could see their lives. I could see the shine in their eyes, especially Daddy Janki when she remembered Brahma Baba. And since it had only been 6 years since he'd passed away, his influence was still so strong, so great. And every time Daddy would remember him, she had such love in her eyes. It sort of melted our hearts as well. And she used to tell so many stories about how he was and what he did and how he said things and how he faced things. Naturally, we were very impressed that someone could have been so great and at the same time so humble. In any case, I decided to go back to Australia after about 3 months coming along to class there. And on the way, I visited Mount Abu, our headquarters, Madhuban, that we lovingly call Madhuban, the forest of honey. And there too, everything was very simple, clean, pure, royal, unsophisticated. And still, his influence, Brahma Baba's influence, was so great that you could see it in the way the things were. As I said, very simple. There was only one car, as far as I could see, and one old truck. It looked like it had been in the Second World War. But it was very, very pure, very, very simple. The eating and sleeping arrangements also very simple. And as a Westerner, I had not been used to sitting on the floor to eat, but that's how it was. And these systems had been put in place and were revered by everyone to the extent that people didn't feel that anything was missing, because spiritually there was such a powerful vibration. And this was Brahma Baba's influence, that he'd left such a great testimony to his state, his spiritual state. We understood that he'd been, for many years, God's instrument to speak what we call the Murli, which is the basic knowledge foundation for what we study in Brahma Kumaris. So every day there would be what we call a Murli, a lesson. And after he left the body, he and Shiv Baba, the Supreme One, the Supreme Soul, decided that they would use another medium, Daddy Guzar, to continue the teaching. Now at a different level, sort of revising everything he'd taught before and bringing us, each of us, to a higher and higher spiritual state. And so it was at a time when I went to Madhuban that these Murlis were happening too. Every 2 or 3 days there was one. Now, as I said, everything was very simple. And there was a room that had been his bedroom that they'd converted into a meditation room. Though I'd seen his pictures, of course, in London, I'd never really thought about meditating in a place where there would be his photo. So one afternoon I decided to go in. I sat there and I think I was alone, or maybe two or three other people. And I started to look at this photo. It was a fairly big photo next to what had been his bed. And I was looking at the photo and it seemed to have a life of its own. So I had to blink a few times to check if, I was not having an optical illusion. But I had a feeling that I was being welcomed. There was a connection that I'd heard also before, this expression, heart-to-heart conversation. But this was probably the first time that I started to do that. I opened up my heart and I was feeling that I was getting welcomed into this divine family, into this very special congregation of souls. Just welcome. The feeling that I had arrived. This was the place that I needed to be. The next day, there was one of these mulis, that Bap Dada, that we call Bap Shiv Baba, God, Paramatma, the Supreme, Bap, Dada, our older brother, Brahma. They together coming in another medium called Daddy Guzar. And as I was the only foreigner at that time in Madhuban, at the end of that muli, I was asked to come in front. The whole muli, in fact, was about arriving at our destination. So in that muli, Baba was asking, do you have the feeling that you have arrived at your destination? That was exactly the feeling that I was having the day before when I was in the meditation room, in Baba's room. So have you arrived at your destination? I was feeling, wow, that's incredible. And Baba talked about three categories of moths. There are the moths that dive into the flame without even thinking about it. There are the moths that circle around the flame and keep on circling, don't have the courage to dive into the flame. And there are the moths that go a few times around the flame and then go away again. And Baba asked us, which moth are you? And of course I wanted to be the first category moth, that I really had the feeling that I had arrived. So the next day, again, I went to Baba's room and I was sitting there in front of this photograph, looking at the photograph, and again I had the feeling that it was alive. And there was also the feeling that not only had I arrived, but this is what I had to do with my life. So sitting there in front of that, in the presence, I really felt Baba's presence. And the feeling that this is my life, this is my way, these are the things that I have to do. In the meeting that I had the day before, I had a personal meeting with Bap Dada. And he said that I would go back to Australia and bring a bouquet of souls. So I had no idea what that meant. So I was asking in this second meeting on the second day I was in the meditation room, what was what does that mean to bring a bouquet of souls? And the feeling was that I was going to go back and I was going to help in the service. I was going to help the service grow. And this is what I wanted to do with my life. And there was such a feeling of Baba's presence again. And when I did go back to Australia, I really had this, I was really convinced that Baba was with me. I Bap Dada, because a subtle form. And these teachings, it's very special. And again, this feeling of presence and of course having a photo that seemed alive. When I did some mistake, I look at the photo and it was as if Baba's expression was, sort of a stern eye. This is not good, my child. And when I did something good, I was able to, conquer some particular weakness. I'd look at the photo and it seemed like Baba was pleased with me. So that's sort of course, it's a subtle presence rather than a physical thing. It's a feeling rather than a fact. This feeling that God was still using the subtle form of Brahma to help in the work that he had initiated many years before. And that, of course, I was suddenly, after a few weeks, I was alone in the center there, or alone. The center actually closed down. I decided that I'd help start another one. And the nearest place to go for help where Brahma Kumaris had a center was Singapore, which is about 6,000 kilometers away from Sydney. So I was alone. Those days, international telephone calls were prohibitive. So I had to develop a connection with Baba. And I remembered his parting words, Nirakari, Nirvikari, and Nirankari, which is the essence of our spiritual effort, if you think about it. Nirakari, I am an incorporeal soul. I don't have to make efforts to be that. I am that. And so the spiritual effort is just to remain as a soul. And as a soul, I interact with people and things at a different level, at a pure level, so that I don't fall into the temptations and of the coloured and variety forms of matter, you could say. All of the things that are connected with our body, our senses. But if I'm the soul, it already tells me how I should interact with matter. And so the chance to become Nirvikari, miceless, which is the consequence of Nirakari, if we think about it. I'm an incorporeal soul. That tells me how to deal with things. And Nirankari means I started to, and until now, I can't say that I've completely conquered it, but definitely I'm much more humble than I used to be. The fact is that as an incorporeal soul, interacting with others and matter in a more spiritual way, I become naturally more God-centric rather than egocentric. So God becomes the focus of my life rather than what I'm doing. All of the games that our ego plays with others in the world, I become more and more detached from that. So these three words, Brahma Baba was the embodiment of them. That's why he's so remembered. And in the month of January, in all of our centers throughout the world, we have special commemorations of the example that he set in becoming Nirakari, Nirvikari, and Nirankari. So these are the lessons of his life. And these are the things that he's influenced so many thousands of people with, that he actually became that, a perfect angel. So, thank you. Om Shanti.